podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam. This is All Across America. Andrew Herrington, welcome to All Across America.
Well, thank you. How are you?
All right. So you're the founder and team leader of Busar Backcountry Unit Search and Rescue Team in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, a wilderness survival instructor, and a member of the Wild Boar Eradication Program in the Smokies. Would you start first?
So I guess the wilderness survival stuff, I grew up just being super into, I was a Boy Scout. I was big into survival. I taught my first survival class when I was in Boy Scouts. And then I always say I went through what I call a primitive stage where I thought survival was all about primitive living. So I go to the primitive living skills rendezvous and ran around barefoot and making arrowheads and had a loincloth, all that type of stuff. And then I went, as I got into high school, I was like, into rock climbing and kayaking. And I had a rock climbing accident when I was in my first year of college. I got my head smashed. So that's when my first search and rescue experience happened because I got rescued. And then I went to college for wildlife biology, worked as a trapper in and around Knoxville, quit that job, went up to the Park Service. I'd gone through what I call a bushcraft phase where I'd, wear all wool clothes and go train in Canada and carry an axe and all that type of stuff. But then when I got into the Park Service, what I saw was I started hunting hogs, and so that's a boy's dream job. You get a rifle, you got traps, you go set the traps and, hunt pigs. And, I was just living in the woods for Monday through Friday for months at a time. I'd come out on the weekends and lots of woods time. And got involved in search and rescue, got involved in wildland firefighting, got my EMT. And what I noticed was on these search and rescues, a lot of that stuff I'd learned in Boy Scouts or at survival schools, or in books or magazines and stuff, it just didn't really correlate to the real world, if that makes sense. So, and then I switched over to law enforcement for about 5 years, switched back to hunting hogs, and then started my survival school at that point to the public. And then I started the search and rescue team in 2015. So, and we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary on the SAR team. So,
10-year anniversary. And how many, in that 10 years, how many rescues have y'all been a part of?
oh man, that's I have no idea. That'd be a good question.
Really?
Lots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they did a study. Well, they did not a study, but last year they just went back to see. We're part of the AD program, which I can explain later if you need me to. But they wanted to see how many of us responded to search and rescues from our team. And our team has been present on like 55% of the rescues over the last 5 years. So that's a really good statistic for us. So, but yeah, I don't know how many rescues, tons.
So
It's
the
about 100
Smokies,
rescues per year. So
100
if you
rescues
said,
per year.
yeah, on average about 100 rescues per year. If you're saying we're going to 50% of those, so it's 500, 250, but that doesn't count because we've got a couple guys that have been, search and rescue rangers here, John Sharble, Anthony Geis, Matt Jernigan's one now. We got two other guys that are applying as well. And of course, Bill Ivey, Greg Greco, myself, we work for the Park Service as well. So we're on all those rescues as a Park Service employee as well.
Wow. Okay. And the Park Service has its own rescue team. You guys augment the rescue team. I mean, the park is how many square miles? I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, it's 500,000 acres. And so, so how it was for a long time in this park, it was search and rescue was a collateral duty of Park Service law enforcement rangers. And then when a mission would kick off, they would take a IC incident command, and then they would request resources from other divisions, right? And so that's how it was for a long time. We came in to fill a void where they needed team members that could do a lot of off trail, the very challenging type rescues, right? And so a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they started what's called the Preventive Search and Rescue Division. And so those are PSAR Rangers specifically tasked for search and rescue. And they got a couple permanents, and then they got seasonals they hire on as well. So we integrate with them, and we augment them. I always describe it as like you have your regular army, then you have your Army Reserve, and so we're like the reserve army comes in, but we're also specialized units. So they know what they're getting when they get us. So which they like. So, but yeah, it's all one team at the end of the day. When you're on a mission, we're all one team.
Yeah.
So
And so maybe, the old line is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Maybe we can talk a little bit about wilderness survival, pre-planning, and, I guess the idea is not to have to call in you guys. You're there when you're needed, but, what are your recommendations? You're a wilderness survival instructor. What are your, like, your top line recommendations for survival, attitude, mindset?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the first thing I'm teaching world survival class this weekend, the first part of it is a mindset lecture. And I always tell people like, "Hey, this may be the most boring." I was like, "But it's the most important." So when it comes down to mindset, 100%. And so the old Boy Scout model, be prepared, that goes to mindset as well. And I always bring it back to a fighting thing. You don't win your fight when you're in the cage. You win it in your training camp, getting ready for the fight, right? And so, that's preparation and training, preparation and checking the weather, trip plan, studying your route, checking in with the rangers, it's basically preparedness, in that regard. And it's obviously you can't mitigate every risk, but there's a lot of risks that you can mitigate. Because what we see a lot of times is instead of it just being one big event, right? So I'll give an analogy. You're flying on a plane, the plane crashes in Alaska, boom, now you're in a survival situation. The majority of the time, it's a series of poor decisions or, just some accident, right? So you leave the house, you don't tell anyone where you're going, and that's your first mistake, right? Then you get out there and you hadn't checked the weather and bad weather rolls in. Next one, right? And then you get out there and then you get lost. Now you're off trail. And then you slip and you break your ankle, right? So you get in a life threatening, unplanned event in a remote area, which is my definition of a survival or wilderness. And it comes in a series of small steps instead of just one big situation. But
I think that's an important point because so many people, when they think of survival situations, they're thinking of a bush plane in Alaska
yeah, yeah.
dropping down in the middle of, frozen tundra and not, something a little bit more, not to say pedestrian, but something that could have been easily prevented and, tell people where you're going, don't wear flip-flops and, bring a granola bar and a t-shirt for your equipment. And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's every single day in the Smokies, and that's what a lot of what the Peace Corps Rangers do is they try and educate, right? They'll be
Mhm.
on trail, they'll be like, "Hey, maybe you should get some different footwear instead of flip-flops," or, "Do you have water before this hike?" or, "Do you have a map?" And so a
Yeah.
lot of it is preventable, right? I've got guys I work with that go to Alaska, and they've been in a plane, and it's almost went down, so that is a potential reality, but for the majority of people, it is, you're on a day hike, you're out there, you get in you have a couple things that kick off, and now all of a sudden, you're in a life-threatening situation, right?
And maybe we could talk a little bit about the Smokies for folks that don't know. I mean, we've got an audience all over the country and all over the world. The Smokies is the most visited national park in the United States.
Correct.
And so there's a lot of tourists. You've got Gatlinburg, you've got Pigeon Forge, you have people who are not necessarily have backcountry experience and want to get a little taste of the woods. And I think it can be one of the more touristy of the, at least outside of the backcountry of the national parks that I've been to because of that. Is that a factor, do you think?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, because you have people that come here for the Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge stuff, and they just say, "Well, hey, let's go to the mountains," and they're in, tourist mode, and they necessarily don't have the equipment. They think they're just gonna go for a short hike, and then they get up there, it gets dark on them, they don't have a flashlight. So now they're using their cell phone, it starts dying. They take the wrong trail and now they're calling, wife's crying, kids are crying, dad doesn't know where he's at. So
You have this acronym STOP A.
yeah, yeah. So that's just if you know for a situation you can't prevent if you're already in it, right? So there's an acronym that we use, STOP. And so the first part is obviously stop what you're doing unless you got to fight a bear, or run from a wildfire. There's times where you don't stop, right? But what we want to do is try to mitigate that adrenaline dump, right? So if you start to panic, you're going to be making decisions under adrenaline, which can cause tunnel vision, audio exclusion, increased heart rate, increased respiration rate. Some people pee themselves, poop themselves, right? Queasy stomach,
Wow.
right? You don't want to be making life and death decisions under adrenaline, right? So I have my students, right? We sit there. I'm like, hey, stop, sit down. That lowers your blood pressure, right? And now let's do some box breathing, right? Get our breath under control. If we can control our breathing, we can
Mhm.
control our body, right? Control our mind. And so Then, we're gonna think. T stands for think. We're gonna think about our priorities, right? Like, what's your, people that make it through a lot of stuff, they have a positive mental attitude, right? So,
Yeah.
what's the reason that you're gonna make it out of this? Like, what are you clinging to? That could be your faith. It could be your family. It could just
Mhm.
be that you're. I once read a story about a guy who didn't want to give up because he didn't want his wife to get the life insurance policy, right? So there's no right or no right or wrong reason there, right? It's just that find something to anchor to know that, like, hey, I'm going to pull through this, right? So get a positive mental attitude, think about what your priorities are, right? And then, the O is going to be for observe, right? So observe your surroundings, observe your gear. P is going to be a plan, right? So start making your plan based upon the priorities. And then A stands for just act, right? Once you have that plan, then, like, let's enact it, right? And if you're in a group, make sure that's well communicated. If you need to change that plan once you get going, then make sure the group understands that, right? So
And I guess for that guy who survived, maybe he needs to think about changing the beneficiaries of his life
that's
insurance
right.
policy.
That's right.
Oh, man. So and talk about trip planning. Y'all have a form. I mean, it's as basic as just telling people where you're going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So on our website, Busar and Big Pig Outdoor, there should be a form where you can just download it. So we do something called a search urgency rating, right? So, and I'll back up with this part first. Why our trip plan is the way it is. So if Mark went missing in the Smokies tonight, and we got the call and they said, "Hey, Mark's missing. He's in the park," and we're like, "Okay, great." Now we've got like 100 different trailheads to check. Like, so if we have an idea what trailhead you're at, where your plan was, now we can start to the investigation phase of our search, right? And so having the information on there, right? So it's going to have who you are. It's going to have your age, right? It's going to have what type of gear you have. It's going to let us know what your experience is. We can add in the weather and stuff, because what we do on this search urgency form is we rate you and you come out as a number, right? And if that number is above a certain threshold, well, then that's going to adjust how we're going to respond, right? So if you, for example, you've got experience, you're a Boy Scout, let's say you're off trail tonight in the Smokies, it's like 6 or 7 o'clock, it's getting dark, someone calls, we do a search urgency rating for you. If you're off trail, you're going to be spending the night out off trail in the dark, right? So we'll put people on the trail for a hasty search, but unless we have we're probably not going off trail looking for you, right? Because if we send our team off trail, we have to mitigate the risk to them, or we can't have our guys
Right.
getting hurt looking for you, right? Now, tomorrow morning when it gets light, we will start going off trail. We'll start checking those linear features for you. But, and so what that trip plan does, the important part of that trip plan does, is that takes that investigation phase, which could take a half hour or so of us trying to get all that information. That information may not be correct, like what type of gear you have and clothes on and stuff. And it compresses it to a photo text, or a phone call, and compresses that time frame to the matter of a minute, right? And so now it launches search and rescue that much faster with accurate information. So trip plan, trip plan, trip plan. If you get nothing else out
Yeah.
of podcasts or my classes, do a trip plan, right? And so I do one at work if I'm gonna my gear stays the same, my age, just changes every year, but my skills, all that type of stuff, that stays the same. So all I do at work is I'll take a dry erase marker and I'll write on the window of the boat what drainage I'm headed up to hunt, what time I expect to be back. So if I don't check in at the end of the day and Como says, "Hey, Andrew didn't check in," they send a ranger out to where the boat is. They see the trip plan written right there, right? Because my
Oh,
day's so variable. Like, I could go out, I could find sign somewhere else. I'm like, I'm gonna go up this drainage. But it could be a text. Most of us know where we're gonna recreate.
yeah.
I've trained a couple girls for Naked and Afraid, and like everyone's always like, "Well, what if I end up in the woods and I don't have anything, or I've only got a knife?" Then I'm always like, "Well, then you're an idiot, right? Like, why didn't you take the gear you needed? Why didn't you
Yeah.
tell people where you're going? Why didn't you check the weather and stuff?" We have that ability. We have what's called a decision point when we leave our home to go to this recreation spot, we can make the choice to do different stuff. And so, like, I was into the mountain man stuff and bushcraft stuff, and like we just get caught up in that. So like I teach from a very contextual position of like, hey, all that stuff's great. I'm a hunter, trapper, and forager by trade. I love all that stuff. I'll teach all that stuff, but it's just the right context, right? And for wilderness emergencies, right? That's when we always cheat, always win, right? So stack the deck in our favor.
In other words, bring gear. Life is not a reality show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, once I teach you to make a bow drill fire, you won't ever go in the woods without a lighter again, especially if I
Yeah.
make you do an immersion drill first, right?
Talk about, like, let's hear about the immersion drill and then making a fire. What's that all about?
Yeah, so, when we start to, look at wilderness emergencies, right, which I define as a life-threatening situation, that's unplanned in a remote area, right? That's your wilderness survival, right? The skill set, right? And then underneath that, there's gonna be 10 different catalysts, right? I won't rattle them all off, but, getting lost, injury, illness, motor vehicle accident, breakdowns, getting stranded, gear failure, let's see, and then immersion, and maybe I'm probably not at 10 yet. But anyway, when I break all that down in my training class, if we train for injuries, right, that's gonna cover your injury, your illness, and your motor vehicle accidents, because motor vehicle accidents typically have injuries, right? And that vehicle could be a plane, it could be a boat, it could be a mountain bike, whatever, right? And then if we train for spend the night out in bad weather with minimal gear, we cover the bad weather, we cover the gear failure, we cover getting lost, we cover getting stranded, we cover getting a vehicle breakdown. And then if we train for immersion, then we cover the immersion scenario. And I define immersion as you're completely soaked, right? So that could be from falling in the creek or the lake. It could be from getting, bad rainstorm. It could be from crossing a river and that water wicks up your pant legs, or snow wicking up your pant legs, or you sweating into your clothing system. How do we solve the problem when we're cold and wet? And so in my class, we experience all those, right? I have the people this weekend, people who spend the night out in bad weather with minimal gear. We'll do a lot of simulated injuries and training on that. And then at the end, they'll do an immersion scenario where I put them in the creek, keep them there till they're shivering. They have to get out and start their fire. And
Wow.
then that's it. But what I've when we train military and law enforcement, we always put them in scenario based training, right? So that way, when you're in that situation in real life, you don't panic, right? You're like, oh, I've been there, done
Muscle
that, right?
memory. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're like you've got confidence, right? So that's one way to mitigate that adrenaline response is from experience,
I mean, and it's important. I want to get back to what you were talking about earlier for people that are listening. You're a wilderness survival expert and you're doing a trip plan even when you're out for the day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I'm headed off trail, I'm doing a trip plan, right?
Yeah.
And then if I'm headed on a trip, I'm texting that to 2 people that actually care that I'm making it back, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
in a rocky relationship, it's not going to that person, right? So it's
Yeah.
going to my boss, because if I don't show up at work on Monday, he's going to care, and someone else that I trust that knows the area.
Yeah. Let's talk about the wild boar eradication program. You're in the middle of the season. Are you mentioned that you've got a rowboat. Is this on Fontana Lake?
Yeah, it's not a rowboat. It's a sea arc. We got a 24-foot mini barge.
Nice.
But yeah, it's on Fontana Lake, and so I work the south part, and that's everything from Abrams Creek to almost Bryson City. So I work 129 corridor and Fontana Lake. But we go all over the park. If we go up on the mountain, we camp up on the AT during the springtime sometime.
Nice.
To be determined this year.
And so how does the program work? Do you get paid hourly, daily, by catch?
Yeah, no, it's a government job, so it's an hourly basis. So.
Wow. And how you catching these wild hogs?
We use a bunch of different methods, right? So the one I primarily use down here is going to be corral traps, and but we also use box traps. Those kind of the older style. And we've got drop nets. And we've got something called a pig brig. We also use cable restraints, also called snares, in certain applications. And then we also hunt. We hunt during the daytime and nighttime using thermal optics at
Wow.
nighttime.
So when you're saying you're hunting, you've got a gun, my understanding a 308, and you're actually shooting the animal dead in its tracks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if we're hunting right now, on our policy, we're hunting closed areas, and so we'll close off an area, and then we'll go in,
I
and then
see.
we'll hunt that area. So, but yeah,
Wow.
my area traditionally over here on the lake, there's not as much visitation, so you can get off trail and hunt daytime on this area. But a lot of the other areas of the park, there's public pressure, and so it's a lot more nighttime hunting. So.
Right. Okay. And if you trap a wild hog that doesn't kill the animal, it just captures them, and then you're just taking care of it once you get up to that trap.
Yeah, so we dispatch it in the trap, and then we pull samples for disease monitoring. So right now we're
Wow.
pulling blood. We'll take a tip of an ear for DNA sampling, and then we'll take a fecal sample.
And I presume you can't eat these things because of the possibility of diseases and the like?
Yeah, so we've looked at donation programs in the past, and just so hogs are they have to be inspected by USDA, right? And so, due to the possibility of diseases, they would have to be brought out live, right, and then held to the and checked for disease and stuff, which is just logistically a big challenge. Seeing as we've had brucellosis, swine brucellosis, and pseudorabies, pop up. Yeah, they no one's willing to kind of take on that liability.
No, no, I mean, and North Carolina is one of the biggest hog producing states in the United States. It's the
Yeah,
last
that's
thing we
right.
want.
So, yeah, yeah.
And maybe just for people to understand why we're doing this. I mean, I have 2 young boys, and it was different in when I was growing up, there weren't the same amount of invasive species, and we were taught to never harm animals, but you have everything from, lantern flies to stink bugs to tiger slugs to feral hogs. I mean, how is it decimating the Smokies, and why are we trying to eradicate them?
Yeah, so they're a non-native species. They're brought over to a hunting preserve south of the park. Like I think it's in the 40s or so, and they escaped from there when that place closed down. And they bred in with hogs that were free ranging at the time. People used to free range their hogs, and so we have this European wild boar hybrid. And so you got an animal that can reproduce twice a year, have up to six piglets, and those piglets can be sexually mature at 6 months. So you're talking about
Oh my
exponential
goodness.
population growth, right?
Yeah.
And then you're talking about an animal that'll just about eat anything, right? They'll even eat each other. We've had that when the carcasses are laying there, but they'll decimate salamander populations. They'll get in trout streams and root them up, causing siltation. The plant is, the plant community in the park is very fragile in some areas, right? And so they'll do a lot of damage there. And of course, they're directly competing with everything else that eats mass, the acorns and stuff. So your squirrels, your deer, your bear, anything that turkeys, anything that eat acorns, they're going to be competing with. So I always say, like, hey, which do you like better? You like baby bears? Or you like pigs? Because they're competing against each other, and baby bears are supposed to be here.
Yes, yes. And are you guys making a dent, or is it just trying to hold the population steady?
So last year we removed 503 pigs from the park, and that was a kind of a record year for us. But also the population was higher, so it just fluctuates. It's more of a management program. So I used to work on Catalina Island out on the coast of California, and there we could eradicate pigs because it was an island, right?
Right.
Eradicating the Smokies would be an impossible task with the technology we have right now.
And how many people are part of the wild boar eradication program?
Good question. So Joe, Ryan, Bill's deployed right now, but I'll count him. So four, Michael, Hank. So right now, I think we got six guys plus a skill bridge, so six or seven. But there's been up to 10 at one point during
Okay.
different seasons, and so that fluctuates just based upon budget.
And are you ever, in the middle of a hunt and then you get a call for rescue?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so what is maybe we can just if we can just describe, like, how it works. I mean, do you get a call? Like, all right, let's say somebody's stuck out in the woods, they call 911. How does it get to you, and how does it get to your team, and how do you all deploy?
Yeah, so it goes out a couple different routes, right? So how it could happen in the park, right? If I was on duty, I could hear it come over the radio, like, "Hey, we got this incident brewing up," and then they say, "Hey, we're going to send out a Everbridge, which is the text system, right? And then a phone call, a text, and an email will go out to whichever one you sign up for. I'm signed up for all three. It'll go out to your phone, and so at that point, at least switching over guys on Boostar, they can choose whether or not they can respond, right? So some guys may be at work and have the ability to leave. Some guys may be with their family and don't have the ability to leave. Sometimes if I'm not in my hunting season and I get that call for or that text for search and rescue, I may have my kids and maybe my custody during that time, and I can't leave them, so I can't go. But yeah, so there's that flexibility, but that's why we have 20 members on our team currently. And so if I've got 20 guys, I figure some are going to be, maybe a couple guys are on vacation, maybe some guys are at work, some guys can't go. But if I can, field 4 or 5, that's a force multiplier for the park, seeing as our guys are in shape and skilled and all that stuff. So
And how do you train? How do you assess, new people to join the team?
we have a fitness test. We just had 2 guys take it. One guy failed, one guy passed. And so that's the first like barrier to entry, right? And so that's going to require the arduous duty pack test, which is 3 miles, 45-pound pack in 45 minutes. That's the Park Service standard or wildland firefighter standard. And so that's the only physical fitness test required by the park. What we do is then we tack on after that, because that's on a flat track. We're like, that doesn't really represent what we do. So then we throw on a 20-pound search and rescue pack, have them grab a 45-pound kettlebell, and go up and over a picnic table for about 30 minutes. And so that simulates elevation change. And I've had to carry a litter out without a wheel before, right? And so that just that grip fatigue. Then you'll have a deadlift test, right? So that's a trap bar. Our litters are almost like a rickshaw where you get inside. So this simulates that. The number one injury to search and rescue personnel is a back injury. So we figure if you can do 225-pound deadlift 15 times in 1 minute, that your back is strong and healthy enough to be an asset for our team. And then we have the burpee pack pull-ups, and this is where you take your 20-pound backpack and then you drop down into push-up position, jump up to a pull-up bar and do a pull-up. And then you have to do as many reps as you can in 10 minutes, and the minimum is 50. So that's kind of a
Wow.
suck fest. But the reason we do that is because, everyone thinks search and rescue is like a glorious experience, but it's really sucky work, right? Like you'll be crawling through rhododendron, getting stung by yellow jackets, and climbing over stuff. And so I can't take someone out there for a day of my time and gauge whether they're going to be a good fit or not. But in 10 minutes, I can see if they've got the mental fortitude to pass that test and the ability to go all the way from lying on the ground to up and over something, and then have the cardiovascular fitness to do it as well. So.
And ATVs basically are unhelpful in most situations. I mean, most of these folks are in places that are only accessible on foot.
Correct. Now we do have some trails that are administration trails where we can use a UTV, and we've got one
Mhm.
that's set up to where it cannot carry a litter, but they're few and far between. Yeah, the majority of the time, like if the call went out, y like, if you think about call volume in a city, there's tons and tons of calls, right? So we get all the same stuff that you have in a city, except our response times are gonna be way, way longer, right? So, the average time, I would say, on a carryout is gonna be 6 hours, right? From the time you get the call to the time that person's back out at the trailhead to the ambulance is gonna be 6 hours, so 'cause
Wow.
everyone has to drive in, everyone has to get to the trailhead, has to hike in, take the litter in, load the patient up, treat the patient, right? Treat the patient, then load them up, and then roll them out, So it's, can be a long process, so and they can go
Eh,
for a lot longer than that. I mean, the guys had one last year that, went really long, like over 24 hours.
my goodness. And are there any trained EMTs, or are you all allowed to administer, let's say, painkillers and the like?
Yeah, no, the park has its own park medic program. The PCR Rangers, they got a couple paramedics on that. We have our own paramedics on our team too. We got a special forces medic, Mark Silkwood. Rondazzo's a paramedic. John Sharble's a paramedic. He's a flight medic for the Army National Guard. We've got Cody's an EMT, Matt's an EMT, Zach's an EMT, John Danner's an EMT. I'm getting my EMT back because I let it
Wow.
lapse. And then we've got, a handful of EMRs. So yeah, everyone's got the ability to provide care out there, some to higher degrees. And we got 2 physicians on our team as well and a PA.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like it's really difficult, hard work. Why do y'all do it?
Yeah, I think everyone comes for different reasons. I can say that I can speak for my reasons that I like helping people. I have certain skill sets that make me well suited for that type of job. And then specifically with our team, it's like family. It's a brotherhood essentially, where and we've had a couple females pass our test, and we're on a team, and even then we're like, this is a brotherhood, so because they got it. It's just that camaraderie feeling, the bonding during the suck stuff, and then like at the end of the day, we've got a good mission, right? Like we're helping
Yeah.
people. But yeah, I think everyone comes for different reasons. I think some people, we got a lot of veterans on the team, and so these guys are thoroughbreds out there racing, and they come back, and now they're in a pasture, and it just doesn't fit well with them, and so it gives them an opportunity to, experience that, running back in the field again. So it suits well for those guys too.
I mean, and it must be incredibly rewarding to save somebody's life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, some of those experiences when you and even if you just recover a body, knowing that you give someone closure
Yeah,
is a big deal too. So yes,
yeah.
absolutely saving a life, but it's all they don't always end well. But the ones where we actually help bring out a body as well, it does bring closure to the families. So that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, can you describe some of those situations where you are bringing out a body? I mean, what happened there? How often? What percentage of your rescues turn out to be recoveries?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd have to look on statistics. Yeah, I mean, not that many. The number one
That's good to
cause of
hear.
fatalities in the park is going to be motor vehicle accidents. Then it's going to be environmental injuries. So hypothermia or trauma, and then it's going to also stacked in is going to be suicide.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's in there. But yeah, the trauma is going to be from something falling on them, like a tree falling on them, or them falling off something like a waterfall. A lot of times, not
Wow,
non motor
okay.
vehicle accident stuff. So.
I mean, you always hear of these people who are taking selfies on the edge of the waterfall. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, yeah, people do that stuff. But just exploring on the waterfall, like they go up and they like yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going through their head. I mean, basically what it is ignorance. They don't understand like, hey, I'm up here at this height and like these rocks are slick, right? And then all of a sudden
Yeah,
they go off, right? But I get it, like I mean, I've I tell all the young men that come through my class, like, I don't say don't take risks. It's just like, let's mitigate these risks, right? Like,
yeah, and understand the risks, and yeah, if you're on a waterfall and you slip, that could be your instantaneous death. It's
yeah,
not
like, why are we going up
it's
to the
not
top of the waterfall? And if we are going to the top of the waterfall and we need to do that, then let's figure out a way to mitigate that risk, right? Are we on rope, right? Do we have
right,
good
right.
footwear? Do we have, micro spikes on or something, that's gonna give us better traction? So
I mean, speaking of footwear, you have 75 miles of the Appalachian Trail that goes through the Smokies. Are you finding most of your rescues are of the day hiker variety, or do you have some people who are, quote unquote, more backcountry experienced folks out there also requiring rescue?
yeah, so the majority of our rescues are going to be day hikers, right? And I always say the reason why is because well, let me back up. Because the majority of people are day hikers, right? So when we look at statistics, about 50% of people are getting injured, right? And 50% of people are probably going to be overdue hikers, right? Or getting lost. So the people, when you have more people day hiking, there's going to be a higher number, obviously, right? But the problem is when if you're through hiking or backpacking and you get caught out or get lost, you've got the equipment, right? So it's no big deal. So I always tell the people come through my classes like, hey, when you're on a day hike, you need to be prepared to spend the night out in whatever the overnight low temperature is, right? In bad weather, right? Because that may be your reality, because your guard's down. You're like, oh, I'm just going for a hike up to LeConte, and the next thing you know, it's snowing on you up there. You don't have the right gear. But yeah, we do have rescues on the AT. Typically, they're going to be norovirus during the through hiker migration, which is coming up. So they pass around a bug up there and start getting GI issues and have to be rescued out.
Wow. I mean, so we're talking, gastrointestinal things that are just incapacitate them.
Yeah, knock them down. Yeah, we had an environmental injury last week up on the AT, and that patient got flown. So,
And what's an environmental injury?
that could be hypothermia, frostbite, all that type of stuff.
Okay.
I can't really go into patient details, but I can
Of
say
course, yeah.
environmental injury. So
Most memorable rescue in recent memory.
most men, well, it's not recent memory, but like the one that I always go back to is when Rainbow Ricky and I found this older couple that had been lost out overnight behind Spruce Flats, and when we brought them out to their family, their entire family was there, and that was a really emotional experience. So that one always, I was
Yeah.
hooked in, right? So that always,
Wow.
because that was the one that ended like, that had the fairy tale ending of bringing back to their family.
Right.
Whole family's waiting there, and like, just
Oh.
raw emotion. They thought they'd never see him alive again. So
Oh my
that
god.
that's
Yeah.
that was a long, long time ago. But that one's always gonna stick out first and foremost. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I hear that a lot of times you don't hear what happens to the people that you rescue. Is that true?
Do we hear what happens to him?
Yes.
Oh yeah, 100%, right? Like so we can interview them afterwards, right? And so that's where I get a lot of my survival type stuff. Like I can when I rescue someone, they're sitting by a creek, I'm like, "Well, did you drink the water?" And they're like, "No." "Well, why not?" I'm like, "Well, I didn't want to get sick." And so then we look at the latency period of Giardia and cryptosporidium being a week to a week and a half. And so, at
Yeah.
that point I can talk to my students like, "Hey, like we should carry a way to disinfect water, but if you don't have a way to disinfect it, just drink it because we can treat infection. We can't treat you if you're dead, right?" But that's a preventable thing that we can take the stuff. I've got 8% battery left. I don't know how much longer we've got. I just want to give you a heads up that if it cuts out,
Yeah.
that's why.
Well, we'll wrap it up here. Y'all are a nonprofit. How can people find out more about you and support you?
Teambusar.org, right? And so I always say this is like we don't rescue people with ropes and gear and all that type of stuff. We actually rescue backing up with money, right? So your donation directly goes to our training, directly goes to our pre-deployment in the park. It goes directly to our funding that gear. So we're donors are on our mission as well. So I always say donors are heroes too, right? So not everyone can come out here and hike up and down the hills and carry a patient out. But if they can help and they're willing to, we're a nonprofit and they can donate and get a tax write off. So
And that's teambusar.org.
that's correct.
All right. Well, Andrew, thanks for being on the show and thanks for all the work that you do.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know the Zoom was going to drain the battery that much. I had like 67%, but on video, it crushed the cell phone. And, I'm talking about preparedness, but I didn't have a way to charge my phone. So it got cut off. But if my cell phone is my primary, like I teach on the acronym PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, let's just say something happened to me out there in the field. My alternate, right? Cell phone goes dead, right? I didn't have the cord because the cord was in my lunchbox. I didn't take my lunch. And so my alternate is then used my radio. My contingency is my inReach satellite messenger. And then emergency is the fact that I did leave a trip plan, right? So PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. So for all our life-saving systems, whether it's signaling, shelter, fire, water, we want to make sure we use that PACE acronym.
And so the difference between alternate and contingency is basically like second tier and third tier?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, now it could just be like in fire, it could be your second lighter, it could be your third lighter, right? But just a backup to the backup, right? It doesn't have to be a different thing each time. It doesn't have to be, a lighter, then a ferro rod, then a flint and steel, then a bow drill. It doesn't have to be all
Right.
those. It can be,
Right.
it can be, a couple lighters, and a ferro rod. So
That's exactly what I do. And, on the podcast we started with Riverside. That didn't work. We had Zoom as a backup. And if
there you
that didn't
go.
work, I could record a cell phone. So we've got the three in an emergency. Well, podcasting is never an emergency.
There you go. Good point.
And let's hear about Big Pig Outdoors.
Yep. So we teach classes kind of based upon my experience. I've been an outdoor professional for over 30 years. Whether that's, you know, as a professional hunter and trapper, law enforcement backcountry ranger, EMT, wildland firefighter. But we take those real world experiences and put them into our classes. So that's a Survival 101 class, our land navigation classes, and our wilderness first aid classes are taught by medics. On the bushcraft side of it, we have foraging classes, put that in the context of bushcraft. And then, of course, we always do custom classes, and also in the bushcraft would be like tracking classes. And then we do a lot of custom classes, do a lot of school programs as well. So we can check us
Great.
out at bigpigoutdoors.com. Yeah, oh yeah, I was just going to say, I always tell all my students, like, if you if you think about statistically, injury is your biggest risk, right? Like based upon the statistics in our park, right? So if you take a good 2-day wilderness first aid class, whether it's from us, taught by our medics, or from Solo or Landmark Learning or wherever you're at, you can find a 2-day wilderness first aid class. You cover that base. The next thing would be a good land navigation class that is taught in the field. So then you're going to cover the getting lost. And the last thing is spend the night out in bad weather with minimal gear. So find a place that'll have you do that in a good, safe training environment as far as a overnight survival class. And then you're ready for like 99% of emergencies, right? So
And you do a lot of your classes not in the summertime when you actually have real weather.
yeah, I can't fake cold weather. So, you know, if I could control the weather out there, I'd teach year round. But yeah, I need cold weather so I can have the cold water and the cold temperatures and stuff. And so, that's what really gives them the confidence. Like you can see people. For some people, it's the hardest thing they've done in their life is doing that immersion drill. And when they come out, they've got real confidence. They go back to work that next week knowing they've pushed themselves in that context, and that gives them immeasurable confidence when they get out to the woods.
And what time of year do you find you're doing your most rescues? Is it more during the shoulder seasons, summertime? I'd imagine wintertime people know what they're in for, or not even in the park at all.
Yeah, it's during the summertime and then during the leaf season. So summer and fall. So when the leaves start changing, we get a lot more visitation. And of course, during the summertime, we have the highest visitation. So,
It's really just a numbers game then.
yep, numbers game. Yeah, and
Fair enough.
same goes for where these incidents happen. We've got like 5 different trails where the majority of it happens, and that's due to visitation. The most visited trails.
Right, right, right. Fair enough. Makes sense. So
Yep.
well-traveled terrain. At least you know where you're going most of the time because I know there's what,
Yeah.
800 miles of trail in the Smokies?
Yeah. Yeah. It's about close to 900. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm glad we are able to make that happen. And it's great seeing you this morning and then again in the afternoon. And as you were saying before we started recording, in the meantime, you killed 5 hogs. So you're doing good service to the wildlife of Great Smokies and for the people too. All Across America is produced by me, Marco Vig, in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Visit us on Instagram at All Across America. Check out our website, allacrossamerica.com. There's an interactive map with all our episodes, and there's a Contact Us page where you can send your reactions, guest ideas, and suggestions. So get in touch, stay connected. To me, that's what podcasting is all about. Thanks for listening.